and make a start. We're about 20 minutes behind our scheduled timetable, so we'll have to try and make up some time during this morning, early afternoon if we can. So, as mentioned, we have several sponsors for the event. One of those is Clyde & Co. There's two gentlemen who will be taking it in turns. So we've got firstly Edd Mills-Webb, who's a partner of Clyde & Co. Edd specialises in international trade, shipping and insurance disputes. He advises clients on all issues relating to international sales, movements of goods, finance, insurance and regulatory issues, with a great deal of experience with commodities, charter parties, bills of lading disputes. Edd also has he advises clients in particular on a number of incidents following STS operations. The other gentleman we have here is Captain Martyn Haines, Senior Master Mariner, Clyde & Co. Martyn joined Clyde & Co. in June 2011 from leading P&I Club, where he was the Senior Claims Director, handling all types of major casualties, incidents and high-value claims. He has 40 years of shipping experience and sailed on a variety of vessels from VLCCs to heavy lift. Martyn undertakes casualty investigation, provides in-house consultation for the marine lawyers in the global practice. I apologise for laughing, but there was a discussion around his seniority.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll pass her the thing. Oh, sorry. And the discussion will be liability, contractual agreements, and letters of indemnity.
Yeah, when they say 40 years, you start thinking, well, I must have started in my nappies, so just go with it, so fine. We're changing the temperature, so I apologise if you're sort of like trying to thaw out. I thought it was symbolic with the LNG talk anyway. So now we're warming up with law, so now it's time to bring the temperature up, because I'm sure we've already heard lots of issues when people say, what happens if? So we'll go on to that. Certainly I've been involved with this for a few years myself personally, and I'm very interested in it, which makes a help. As Claudine says, I don't go around single-handed. Lawyers always go around in pairs. It's for safety, so Edd's with me today, so that's good. The aim of this presentation is to generate discussion and comment, viewed from the legal perspective of STS operations. Unfortunately for non-lawyers, shipping and law have a close affinity. Clyde & Co., as just been advised, been involved in many disputes over the years, and we just remain surprised, actually, me personally, having been on a tanker, of the ship owner's ability to meet the commercial requirements. The pressure as they employ ships that are actually not specifically designed to close proximity mooring, to carry out cargo operations and have a crew in an open seaway. And the crews, of course, would prefer to be tied up safely alongside and just focus on cargo operations. But ship owners have met the challenge and continue to do so. But perhaps the designer ships in the future will say, right, we have to have tankers with bow thrusters. How many tankers have a bow thruster? Very few, if not at all. But if they're going to be called on to do STS operations, then the design may have to change to make it safer, the risk assessment. So, out of necessity, the industry has had to be regulated in order to protect ship owners, operators, crews, and the environment. But it comes with it liability disputes. Accidents or incidents are inevitable, and here we see a variety of them. Maybe difficult to see on there, but the biggest spike in the middle is relating to mooring lines, the breakage of mooring lines. And I'm sure my colleague on the panel, Petter, will be talking about this as he's on from the UK Club Loss Prevention. But from the legal perspective, we are looking at liability, or the person responsible for the incident. So these may be the results, but not actually the cause of the incident. Apparently a small dent on the side of a ship, a hull, the superstructure, with repair valued at possibly tens of thousands of dollars, inevitably leads to claims of hundreds of thousands of dollars due to deviation to the repair yard, due to potentially a certificate of class, to losing oil major approval, loss of business, devalued business. So that claim escalates very quickly. So you see a small bend in the ship and say, oh yes, 10,000, go away. And maybe 6 months later, she's back on track. So, where do we start from? Has the law changed to meet the requirements? And on the chart here, as I say, this is a discussion chart. You can see who's involved. And here's the three parties, the two ships and the service provider. Where's the contract? Who's got the contract with those three people? It's very unlikely the contract exists between the two vessels. Never seen it. Every dispute we've had, never a contract between two ships. So the mother vessel or discharging vessel and the daughter or receiving vessel. The service provider is also unlikely to have a contract with either vessel. So, no contract there. Oh. So, what have we got? Potentially 3 contracts. Governed by say different contracts, but also makes the task of finding a responsible party in the incident very difficult. Great for us, not good for the ship owner. In fact, so difficult, what happens in practice? And there's a few guys here that actually deal with claims. The claim is brought in tort or civil wrongdoing between the two vessels rather than go around the contractual route, because it is believed to be easier and achieve a quicker result. We have had cases where they have been argued on liability for a small damage by using the international collision regulations, where they've said, well, the vessel on my port side should keep out of the way for the vessel on my starboard side. That vessel was overtaking, so you should be keeping out of the way of the vessel being overtaken. That is a legitimate argument that's been presented of why we're not liable for the damage. So, does that mean the contract is obsolete? But the question is, are they suitable or adapting effectively for the trade? Now, I'm switching on to my colleague Ed, who's going to look at actually the existing charter party clauses, and then I'll come back with possible suggestions that would generate a discussion.
Charter party terms and STS clauses, frankly, have a unhappy relationship. So many of the presentations that you've heard this morning and will go on to here are focused on the technical expertise, and I was amazed to see the progress on the LNG side in Thanos's presentation over the last 10, 15 years. It's incredible. I've got a clause from BP Voy 4. It's one of the better voyage charter parties, very commonly used in oil industry. Also, the BP forms are widely used in LNG, LPG as well. It has not kept up. All of these concepts that we've discussed and the contracts and the mess that we have on the legal structure has not kept up with what's actually going on. And these things are not beyond resolution, but so much of what is said is quite easy to say, and I think none of this is going to be surprising, but it's not actually being delivered in practice. And that means that when something goes wrong, everyone has a mess to deal with, and a lot of head scratching and a lot of doubt. And from a legal perspective, all we ever try and do is say, why have doubt? Manage your risks better, draft new contracts, improve the business you're doing. That's very much what I've seen happen in the LNG industry. They've market-led. That's what the oil majors used to do in the oil industry. That's how OCIMF and organisations like that have come up with these guides. It's about time, I think, that the commercial framework for STS operations in terms of the legal contracts caught up. Let's try and put that into what exactly do I mean by that. I'm not going to read out the whole clause, but it says that charterers have an option to do something. Now, legally, that means if it's just a pure option and that option is exercised, the owner, under this clause, cannot refuse. Well, that's a bit difficult because we've heard already from several of the technical presentations that the owner may need to refuse. The owner may need to say, this is not safe, this is not something I want to do. So straight away, this clause has got problems. It's going to be subject to stuff that's perhaps not written in the clause. That's not very good. Secondly, everyone hangs everything on two general ideas. One, that OCIMF answers all questions. Two, that due diligence answers all questions. And the second idea is not so wrong. Due diligence is a very good concept, and it does work. The problem is no one really knows what it means. And you saw the due diligence for an LNG transfer. I would be amazed if there is a single oil transfer that's happened in the last few years that gets anywhere close to the due diligence that's required in an LNG transfer. It's the same words, but the industry interprets them differently and knows that you have to do different things. So simply saying that transfers of cargo shall be set out in accordance with recommendations of the OCIMF ship-to-ship transfer guideline sets you in the right direction, but really does not give the commercial parties any guidance as to what you actually do, who actually pays for things, what do you do if there's a problem, and of course, how do you keep up with the ever-changing tide of commercial innovation, people wanting to do different things with different ships in different locations. I'm not going to offer any solutions to that problem, by the way. Other than to say that we are, through this process, trying to encourage conversation within the industry through societies like Intertanko, with the classification groups, and also with the major tanker owners and operators to encourage a set of clauses that might work better. Shell Time 4, again, a very commonly used time charter party for all oil and gas trades, is perhaps even worse on this, perhaps reflecting its age. I've been around since the mid-1980s. Charterers shall exercise due diligence to ensure that any ship-to-ship transfer shall, you guessed it, confirm and comply with OCIMF. How on earth does a time charterer ensure anything about what happens offshore? I don't know. I asked the question. That to comply with that clause, a time charterer, if they're actually going to want to comply with it, is going to have to take control of the operation, have people on board. But what does a time charterer do? 9 times out of 10, maybe 90 times out of 100, they've subcontracted, either on voyage terms or other time charter party terms, and they have no control over it whatsoever. And they are trusting their commercial counterparties to put good people on board the ship. But if something goes wrong, an owner can then turn around to the charterer and say, you had to ensure that this went well. It didn't go well. My ship is damaged. Cargo has been lost, or whatever the situation is, you're paying. And that's not a bad starting point for a ship owner to say that under this clause. But of course, that's not the start of the story. It's not even really the middle, because it's not as if the industry is completely unaware of the points that I'm trying to suggest. And rider clauses on charter parties have been very common, but they tend to repeat what's already in the main terms to try and put some flesh on the bones, but without necessarily taking things to any great conclusion. These clauses that I've got here, these 4, are not bad. They're better than a lot we see, but again, it's repetitive. We have to comply with OCIMF. The charterers shall provide at their expense, so that's good, that's some clarity, all necessary equipment for safe operations to owner's master's satisfaction, which shall not be unreasonably withheld. Sounds good again, but it's quite difficult, because if the master isn't satisfied, is he really going to interrupt commercial operations to say, I want better hoses, the fenders aren't very good, that supply vessel isn't good enough? We have to encourage masters to be prudent. That is always their obligation, to put the safety of the ship first and not the commercial pressure simply to say, I better get on with this and hope for the best. 3, charterers shall, if required, provide representatives. I don't know what that means. It hasn't kept up with the regime for POACs to be involved, and is it really charterers' representative? Are they really going to put somebody on board? 4 is actually fundamental to all of this and to this debate, and often what these disputes resolve around is that this entire operation is an issue of navigation, and legal frameworks for shipping manoeuvres have always understood, recognised the distinction that the master is ultimately responsible for the safe navigation of the ship. You cannot transfer navigational responsibility to a charterer without having explicit wording, and no charterer, unless they're crazy, would accept that. So the operation itself, no matter how far and how much the owners try and push responsibility onto the charterers, it's always with the owners. This is why the debates and the disputes happen, because there's so much misunderstanding about those issues, so much doubt about which side of the line each issue falls on. Martyn and I very much encourage debate to try and find out how the industry feels about these issues, and hopefully, at some point in this process, we will come up with a suggested standard form of rider clauses to get these things more sorted out. But I suspect that's going to take us a great deal of time.
Okay, this is a swerve ball. I'm from a UK club background, and I'm familiar with offshore contracts. I've always shown you there is no contract between the two ships, but I always say there's a contract to collide. So I'm putting out to you, for the discussion purposes, what's wrong with a not-for-knock agreement. Before you start an agreement to come alongside, and you've heard about Ockham trying to do the risk assessment, saying, look, if you do this, it's a safer operation. But there's still fundamentally nothing between the two ships, legally in writing. So it's not a case of creating something, it's actually saying, well, look, you know you're going to do this, why don't you both the ships bear their own risk? The P&I clubs who are covering the other ship's damage is familiar with hold harmless, not-for-knock agreements. So the insurance market can handle it. The whole market can handle it. BIMCO provides standard wording for it. So it's not a case of, ooh, we're not comfortable with that. I don't think I brought one with me, but I've got one in the office of a drafted wording for doing one of these operations. It's whether the industry is up for it or not, because you can imagine the implications on the ship owner when they say, well, who's the name of the ship, send that message to them, can we get an agreement? But what does it mean? You transfer immediately liabilities to the charterer once you've got a knock-for-knock. You don't have this grey area. Now, to me, that's good, because you've got a charter party. Why don't you use it? Why have this, well, it's always going to come back because that ship hit me? Both ships have got charter parties which may have hold harmless agreements. It's just the two ships don't have them. Oh, sorry. So, I'm throwing it out now. If you can say, no, it won't work, don't like it, I prefer to have this vague tort claims, great. Then it would just continue as it is. Are we prepared to move forward and be innovative? One document that is pushed out at the moment is letters of indemnity. You see them all the time, the ubiquitous letter of indemnity. I sometimes wonder if they, what would happen to shipping if they didn't have letters of indemnities. One party is asked to do something in contravention to an existing contract. Don't worry, we'll give you an LOI. The SDS is no exception, and we do see these being given to the ship owner, generally from the service provider. Do the charter parties say you must have an LOI? Probably not. This is a practice purely by the service provider. Why? Well, during the SDS operation, the master remains responsible. So why is there need for an LOI? The master is responsible. Like a pilot going on board a ship. The master is responsible. Does the pilot come on board and give the master an LOI? And what are you signing for? Is it the liabilities of both ships or your ship? Or what is it for? There was a question this morning regarding I'm just trying to find who it was now, regarding the person climbing up the ladder and who's responsible. Well, that's familiar for the P&I because, yeah, any person on the ship is responsibility of the master or the owner. Stevedores, pilots, Anybody, passengers, anybody that goes up that gangway, as soon as he puts his foot on the ship, the owners are responsible. Common thing. Now, what do the ship owners can do? They have a letter of indemnity. They get the guy to sign it, coming up the gangway, say, sign this piece of paper, we are not liable for your trips and falls. They like it. They should have their own insurance. So when they step on board the ship, they're under employment. They're not under the ship owner's employment, they're under their own contractor's employment insurance. So that's why they should answer that question there. So are we going to, the question is, are we going to sign it? Is there a contract between the ship owner and service provider? No. That's the sort of thing. Why create a contract? That's what it says. I hereby request the services of the STS superintendent in accordance with the terms and conditions of the service agreement. The ship owner hasn't got any terms and conditions. So why create terms and conditions? And importantly, by accepting them, you could prejudice the P&I cover. So our recommendations has always been to the P&I clubs and to ship owners, because they said, shall we sign it? We've said no, don't sign it. And inevitably, I've yet to see an STS being cancelled because an LOI hasn't been signed. So I put it out what the industry thinks on the matters. So we've got the existing contracts, a knock-for-knock, and LOIs. Very quick presentation, meant for discussion. So Ed and I are more than happy to hear those questions now before we hear from Petter. Stunned.
So,
Again, from a secret person in Holland, the question is, many times I experienced in rather remote area of OPL, we are finished with the transfer, and then the opposite vessel said, no, we cannot disconnect until we have the charters, because as ship ship different. And the weather starts to get adverse. Of course, you can always cut the line. But what do we do in this case? Let's just say that, as this gentleman mentioned, there's a little dent, $10,000, which turned out to be $1 million later.
Yep.
Because we didn't separate in time.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's something I have experienced, my colleagues have experienced.
Really?
The one party don't want to separate until even the other ship is completely empty.
Really?
So what do we do there?
Okay. No, yeah, that's fine. The responsibility to the safety of the ship is with the two masters. And if they consider that can remain tied together whilst these documentation are sorted out, the safety of the ship is paramount. So what we do now, and it's helped with communication, with emails, telephone call, you issue a note of protest, say, look, for safety reasons, I'm having to disconnect the pipes and separate. We have a dispute, put down in writing what the dispute is, reserve your position, but you're doing it for safety reasons, and you will not be criticised for that. None at all. So if you separate for safety reasons, it's not a case of, well, I've prejudiced my cargo claim because of the quantities. As long as you have evidence that the weather was bad, it's not a case of you're trying to escape with more cargo. You've got to have evidence. And if both ships agree, then that could be supported by both masters as well. You know, you're recording a dialogue. You've got the ability to record. Exactly.
But he don't claim for the safety. He says the charter that used me to
Yeah.
actually, I know what he's saying, that you cannot leave the responsibility of the master. But that's very common, the argument.
Yeah.
We're talking about safety 12 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right. And the charter is not accepting any responsibility for safety of the ship by insisting on you being together while they sort out the contractual liabilities. And you've got two charterers, don't forget, not just one. So who's the charterer saying stay? And the other charterer says go. So put it in writing, everything in writing, record it, emails, just do as much as you can and get the other ship, the VDR, it's being recorded.
Have opened so many issues
I'm going.
So, you said how the charter is enforcing or conducting the due diligence. I can tell you one example. So, we are suspicious. They ask for clearances, for ships clearances.
Louder, please. Could you speak a little bit louder?
Yeah, I mean, the charters are asking for ships clearances.
Right.
So they send 5, 10, whatever ships for clearances. They send usually the Q88. Okay, we start asking questions, send a certificate, this and that. So someone can say that all this is as a part of charter's due diligence.
Mhm.
So without knowing it, we are providing evidence not only of our due diligence, but also of their due diligence. Is that true or not?
Yep. Yeah, the individual ship owner has to exercise its own due diligence. And it can't be delegated. If the charter, who has no responsibility, cannot exercise due diligence, because the ship owner can't rely on that. He may be making decisions for financial reasons and say, well, that ship is, they have to charter a ship in. Is it cheaper? What's the terms of that one? So the ship owner has to say to the charterer, what have you done? Why have you made that decision for that ship in particular?
Yes, but when we clear the ship,
Yeah.
one way or another, do we, let's say, share responsibility, the charter's responsibility at that point?
Is there anything in the charter party to say you're sharing responsibility? No. So why should you be commercial pressure to share that responsibility? Yeah. That's to say, that's where you could be. The commercial pressure is, well, we'll get another ship owner who will accept it.
Can I ask you something more about the knock for knock?
Knock for knock.
Okay, you presented something very easy to be accepted by the parties. To my mind, I think it's extremely difficult to be accepted by the charters. First of all, because they don't understand nothing about these issues, at least the operational side, not the legal department. But even if they understood, it's very difficult to assume such kind of responsibility and liability. Why? How do you think? I mean, can you propose a draft wording of this agreement? What would we say?
Well, if you're familiar with the offshore supply vessels, yeah, it's in the BIMCO contracts. And it basically all it says is that if you hit me or I hit you, we both bear our own damages. So you're not looking at the other ship's damage. Is off hire, anything. So if you hit me and it causes a hole in the side of the ship, my insurance pays. That's how the offshore industry works. So both ships go into that risk, a high risk, relying on its own charter party. Because they're saying, look, Mr. Charterer, you're asking me to do this operation. You have a responsibility under that contract. Let's sharpen up the charter party, which is what Eddie's saying. Let's sharpen it up. Get them on responsibility. So if I've got a hole in my ship, it's because you've employed me to an area which is high risk. And the ship and the hull and the P&I will pay for that damage.
I'm trying to understand where do you derive this optimism from this acceptance?
I love it.
Can we have
Yeah.
one more question?
Yeah, please. Yeah, it's a good one.
It's a very good question, because I think the use of the word risk there goes straight to the distinction I was seeking to make between navigational risks and commercial risks. That type of clause is common for the allocation of risk in STS transfers. My personal view is that it's almost meaningless to try and suggest that it transfers navigational risk for the operation. I don't believe that it can mean that it's a full indemnity, i.e. whatever happens, if the master of the ship is completely negligent during the STS operation, that means that risk of the master being negligent is the charterer's risk, because the charter party says that this operation is at charterer's risk. I think it cannot mean that. So what does it mean? I don't actually know. We have had several debates and over a number of claims on that wording, and thankfully all these claims settle. But until that wording is taken to court for a judgment to decide what risk it actually means, that one of the problems with the charters is that this doubt remains. For what it's worth, the arbitration decisions that we have had, which remain private, but I can say that it has never ever been accepted by London arbitrators, as far as I'm aware, that just general risks associated, any risk associated with the transfer, including navigational risk, can be transferred to the charterer unless the charter party says the master shall be the charterer's agent during this process. The master shall be under the direction of the charterers. That's what you'd need to transfer all risk genuinely to charterers. So I'm afraid in answer to the question, I don't know what risk means in that clause, but I would say it means very little. It certainly doesn't transfer what it suggests.
Can I just help a little bit there? Yes, I totally agree. It's not defined. There is an effort by the American Coast Guards to identify risks in two ways: qualification and quantification. We have not reached the quantification phase, but they are very much welcoming when you're actually addressing risks to qualify them. When you're actually saying risk ship-to-ship LNG transfer or ship-to-ship cargo transfer, why necessarily think as a master mariner regarding navigation? Why can you not think operations during ship-to-ship having actually integral risk of how you do them? So this is the issue here. The first approach that addressing risks is not actually giving a numerical value to them, which is very difficult because it's a legal issue, okay, depending on the country of operation, but it's giving a qualitative criticality number to prioritize them as such. And then if you address this, that it has been evaluated, as we do it at every LNG ship-to-ship operation, then the administration, the port authority, the insurers, they are fully aware of what they're actually risking against or not against. And this is all established. It's a process which it has generated its roots back to the offshore oil and gas industry. It's not a new process, and it's actually doable. But it's again, coming back to what initially said, it's how you transpire this type of operations, this type of actually reviews to a very wide industry, which is here we're talking about a tanker industry, which is very wide, numerous operations happening globally. Here we're talking about more specific operations in less numbers. When in these numbers, they will become larger because of bunkering, and they will because of bunkering operations inevitably, and probably we'll have to face with the same problem.
Frans, thank you for that. Do you think there is, apologies in advance for the question I'm about to ask, but in terms of a ballpark guideline for the audience, what do you think in terms of timescale and cost an LNG due diligence exercise involves?
An LNG due diligence exercise involves, if it's a novel system, involves two things. How you actually have designed, placed it, integrated with the rest of the systems, which is an easier part because then you relate directly to internationally accepted quality standards and classification issues. Then the most important part is an operational issue. Any novel technology becomes an operational issue. And that, so in time, to give you an understanding, a novel system, a novel propulsion system, a novel ship-to-ship system, it will take 1.5 years to be fully evaluated. And that you do it during development. The operational issue would probably take less time depending on the experience of the charterer or the owner involved. For both of them, and I'm saying the general for the forum, just to have doubts, everything is very well established. This is what I'm trying to translate to the marine industry, to the shipping industry rather than the marine industry in general, is if you're looking at the word risk, most of the master mariners say, my God, what does it entail? What am I supposed to do? It can be everything. Yeah. It can be years of work, or millions of. No, if you talk to the oil and gas operator, immediately they'll know the steps that they have to take, and many of them, the shrewd ones, nowhere to stop as well. So this is the difference. So we have to translate a little bit of that to across in reality.
Right, thank you. And in answer to the gentleman's question about clearances, a good response for an owner to say to a charterer on the endless stream of clearances against Q88 is, what are you asking me to clear for? What operation are you actually intending? Give me details of that operation. I want cargo details, location details, timing, who is my STS provider. Give me your due diligence assessment and I'll give you my comments, and I'll need a day or two to consider it properly. That's not a bad response to give, and trying to get a charterer to focus on what they're actually asking an owner, the purpose of a clearance. All of those issues would be good if the industry picked it up.
Can we say thank you to Ed and Martin for their very
Emotive.
emotive